There we go. Our recording kind of cut off there for a sec. But Nathan recently graduated with his PhD in educational leadership, policy, and human development, and actually teaches now as an assistant professor in CNR with the Parks, Recreation, and Tourism Management Department. So super pumped. Oh, thank you. And for your slide to have you here with us today, Nathan. So that'll be the last of my comments, and I'll mute myself and get off. But hopefully, folks, I see some stuff coming in the chat too. So.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Connor. All right. So keep trying and always go for an opportunity. I like that. And yeah, definitely building genuine connections with people. Super important. Great to hear. And yeah, and I think with our little bit of time together, I'm going to try to build some connections with y'all, even though it's, sort of a one-way and then backed by chat situation with the way that Zoom panels are set up. But yeah, as Connor mentioned, I own this business downtown with my wife and partner in everything. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then also I do teach at NC State, and I'm here in Biltmore for anybody who ever had a class in Biltmore when you were a student. I teach in the Parks and Recreation and Tourism Management Department. So if you ever had an Introduction to Parks and Recreation course as an elective, I teach that course and a couple of others. But hopefully you gained something out of today that challenges you, or even that you disagree with when it comes to wellness. Because I think that this term is really loaded when we hear it. Like even naming our business Current Wellness, I was like, man, I don't know. Wellness is such like a loaded term, and there's so many associations with it. So to start us off, again, utilizing the chat feature, if y'all wouldn't mind jumping on, I just want like one thing that comes to mind when you hear the term wellness. And that could be like a single word, that could be an activity, that could be for yourself. What comes to mind when you think about wellness? And if you wouldn't mind throwing that in the chat, that would be awesome. Oh, thanks, Alex, about the importance of relationships. Awesome. All right, so we got fitness, eating healthy, this idea of a healthy mindset, taking care of yourself, so mind, body, and spirit. So a few different components, and we'll definitely hit on that a little bit. Thank you, Hannah and Kristen. But certainly, I think that this idea of like fitness coming first, I think there's a lot of messaging around that. Certainly, if you're on Instagram or any other kind of social media, it's hard to avoid the fitness equals wellness, wellness equals fitness scene today. And yeah, and the idea of not being stressed. So there's an emotional component to it. That's awesome. So thinking about my own self, like I've definitely changed over time, and you might have found too that regardless of your age, you probably have a different idea of what wellness is now versus what it was when you were younger. So I actually think of myself, and this is like a super scary picture to put on a forum that will be recorded, but please be kind. So this was me as a teenager. I was probably 16, 17 years old. And definitely the term wellness wasn't really much of a thing then. But it was about like healthy eating, and it was about like working out and that kind of thing. And certainly I did physical stuff, like I lifted weights occasionally, or as you can see from my t-shirt, I played basketball. But when I think of the word wellness, what strikes me most is like I thought of these chips that my mom used to buy. And if you've eaten these, feel free to comment. But like baked Tostitos to tortilla chips should not have been invented. I tried looking for an image for them because I don't know if they even make them anymore. But it says at the top like new look, same great taste. And when I saw this image, I was like, man, I wish it was like new taste, same look. because when my mom would purchase snacks for the family, it was like low fat, baked. She made some interesting meals like that included brown rice or steamed vegetables, which didn't really appeal to my palate. But yeah, I thought about this kind of restrictive idea of wellness about like, oh, you need to do less, or you need to buy something that's not tasteful to be well and to be healthy. Um, and now, fast forwarding, as I mentioned before, wellness has turned into this thing of like this post. So the only bad workout is the one that you didn't do. You know, this idea that unless you woke up at 5 a.m. and went running and then went to work and then lifted weights over lunch and then had like a low calorie meal at night, you know, that's the way to be well. It's almost like this like Schwarzenegger-esque way of thinking about do or die wellness. Um, and then, of course, who can talk about wellness now without talking about Gwyneth Paltrow, who has somehow co-opted wellness for her own personal brand and beauty. I don't really understand why she individually thinks that exfoliating has something to do with wellness, but certainly this idea of wellness as image and wellness as beauty has become this dominating thing in our society, which I think is really unfortunate. And then lastly, you know, we see all these helpful tips, right? We see like, oh, we should be doing this certain diet, or we should be avoiding these foods. We should be doing the Whole 30, or doing other things that are, you know, for weight loss or for skin tone or for other aspects of our wellness. And often, you know, this journey is just fraught with like disappointment and what's called yo-yo dieting. You know, this idea that like trying to lose weight in and of itself, invariably, 98% of the time, you're going to regain weight, and you're going to be in this constant shifting cycle of weight loss and weight gain, which obviously is stressful, not just for your mind, but also your body. So what we at Current Wellness and my own self really encourage folks to do is rethink their idea of wellness. And that's going to be the main focus of today, that hopefully you can just find something small that you can rethink about your own wellness from our time together today. You know, that's the idea that, like, to put it frankly, a lot of wellness messaging and advertising and help guides and books, so much of that is BS. And hopefully you recognize that and you see sort of through the veil that they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to like, encourage you to not feel good about yourself so that you do something extra. And so much of that is just shaming. So sorry for the mini rant there. But yeah, we like to think about wellness differently. So returning to this dude, you know, he looks happy, right? And he looks like he's being active, doing some wellness things. But for me, I was like internally just like fraught with depression. You know, I didn't really have a whole lot of purpose, especially going into college. Like I dropped out the first time in college because I didn't know what I wanted to do and thought I should have it all figured out and have the right answer. Maybe some of you can relate to that. But I know that I spent a lot of my late teens and early 20s trying to figure it out, trying to find those things that would make me happy, and only returning to like myself at the end of the day, and not being able to be a positive person. And it was really just by happenstance that I kind of discovered things that were well for me. So I want to save you the time just by sharing a little bit of my story and just a couple of actionable takeaways today. So for me, I was never outdoorsy as a kid, but I fell into it when I was working at University of Wisconsin in my first career as a web developer. And I didn't really know that I loved the outdoors until my girlfriend at the time convinced me to go on a camping trip with this outdoors club. And especially then, the outdoors, people were starting to understand this idea of connection to nature being beneficial for your health, but it was still super early on. And so for me, it was discovering that personally, that, yeah, being on this bank of the river in Wisconsin, canoe camping, felt good to me, even if it wasn't being on a treadmill or being, with a set of weights. And also, I grew up in the Midwest, so never spent any time paddleboarding or around saltwater. I was like, who would want to live on the coast? But after my career as a web developer, the outdoors encouraged me to quit my job to go back to school for outdoor education. And then I went to grad school for higher ed and student affairs because I finally found what could be neat about higher ed and lifelong learning. And that brought me to Wilmington and my first post grad school job. And really just falling in love with saltwater and paddleboarding and oysters. As Connor knows, I have an oyster tattoo now, which I think is part of my daily reminder of, what means wellness to me, what I define as wellness. And in this picture, I'm taking a group of students at UNC Wilmington on a paddleboarding trip, which ostensibly should have been for them. But certainly that day was awesome for me, being in Banks Channel behind, Wrightsville Beach. And then fast forward to most recently, I used to be the assistant director for outdoor adventures here at NC State. So if you went on an outdoor trip in the last 6 years, I might have been your trip leader or supervised student staff who were. And part of my own wellness is figuring out how to use the outdoors for diversity and community. And so this is a trip that we do to the Louisiana Gulf Coast every year, where students volunteer and they go canoeing on the Gulf Coast and they discover their own wellness, like with these different activities, and hopefully in gains of like being like more engaged students and being more civically minded when they come back from school or come back from this trip. So you might have seen this before. Could you comment real quick in the chat? Like, is this idea of the dimensions of wellness like new or familiar to you? One of those two? All right, it's new to one of us, new to Hannah. Yeah, the financial part is new. Yeah, okay, so some different parts. So Hannah, Kristen, and Alex, some of it familiar, some of it not. So as you can see on the screen, I shamelessly stole this from Wellness and Recreation, but I worked there for a number of years, so I feel like I contributed enough to use it now. But there's a few different models of this. This is the model that NC State uses to define wellness. But yeah, one thing I want you to notice is that a lot of the examples we brought up early on of wellness, they might fit into physical, right? Like we talked about fitness and working out as a form of wellness, or emotional, like not being stressed. But I think often we don't necessarily think of the others as being parts of our wellness, even if we might know it internally. So for myself, when I think back on like what I just shared briefly about my experience with y'all, for me, like connecting with the outdoors and finding this career that fed my soul more than sitting at a computer for 10 hours a day, that was purpose. That was like connecting with this career, connecting with this passion, this vocation. And definitely like part of that is being an educator here at NC State and teaching in PRTM. But also like community, like when I connected with this outdoor group of people and this broader movement to encourage people to use the outdoors for wellness, like that gives me a lot of fulfillment. And also like here in Raleigh, like being part of the business community, me and my wife Britt are definitely invested in this idea that we believe in Raleigh, that Raleigh is this forward-thinking place, and that with NC State and the innovation that happens here, we feel connected to this broader community and feel at home here. So that's an idea of community wellness. And then for social, some of y'all mentioned relationships in the first presentation of the day, and definitely that's a valid part of wellness that we don't always think about. When my partner and I are at odds, obviously that also affects our own individual wellness. And so figuring out what about that relationship, could be improved a little bit, or what part is maybe not as great as it might be. And here on campus, you might have had an experience as a student, especially a first year student, having trouble making friends with that transition from high school to college, if you were a traditional age college student. And we encourage students now at NC State to invest in their social wellness, to think about it as a part of their health, that they're making new friends when they come to school. And then lastly, with financial, I think some of that has to do with the equity of wellness and the broader scope of things, which is the more money you have, it's likely the healthier you are. Having health insurance and all the other things that y'all likely have, hopefully have in kind of big kid jobs. I feel like I'm in a big kid job, even though I'm an adult. But yeah, finances definitely affect things, but so often we think, oh, my bank account is something I need to manage. And we don't necessarily think of man, if I'm investing in the future of my finances, that helps me feel less stressed. But man, if you look at divorce statistics, the number one predictor of that is financial stress among couples. So definitely a component of wellness. So just briefly, just since I, am at NC State still and work for WellRec, and that model came out of wellness and recreation, I want you to know that, your university is really leading the way nationally in this conversation. So if you have a chance to visit the new Wellness and Recreation Center, or you can become members as alumni, the climbing wall is great for, working on your legs and arms and stuff, but also there's just a vibrant climbing community there. And also a lot of the spaces were intentionally designed for social interaction, which is super ironic in the time of COVID. Kind of are waiting for those to come more alive. But definitely NC State is leading the way. And then just briefly about our business, and I think that leads into some tips that I have for your personal and professional wellness. We renovated this building on Southeast Street. So if you've ever been to Transfer Food Hall or Rochambeau Beverage Company by the Lincoln Apartments, we're right on the east side of downtown, also near Moore Square. We recognize that wellness was often too fitness, even in some ways bro culture kind of about it. And so we designed our building and our space from the ground up to be an integrative wellness model. So yes, we do have this fitness and movement studio, but as you might have seen on that first slide, we also have a teaching kitchen. So we teach cooking classes in this building as well, and then have offices for mental health counseling and wellness coaching, in addition to chiropractic care. And so what I'd love for you to think about is, are there just one of those components that you think you might want to spend some time on, even making the smallest of change? And so if you wouldn't mind contributing, we're a small crew, and even though we can't share out vocally, is there one dimension of wellness that you feel you're thinking about working on, or that you considered trying out? Zoom will be really fancy when it can edit out these awkward pauses. on the panelist part of things, where presenters are waiting for responses. Uh, yeah, mental and financial wellness. Thanks, Connor. Uh, yeah, being involved in the community, okay, mental health, uh, into regular exercise and doing yoga. Yeah, maybe journaling would help. Yeah. So these are things, it's really interesting because this session is designed for young professionals, and yeah, this is about professional and personal wellness. But as it probably won't be a surprise that this is a theme. These themes are ones that I hear from students as well. In my intro to Parks, Recreation, and Tourism class, they're in the middle right now of doing a leisure repertoire expansion activity. And that's just a fancy way of saying, like, I asked them to look at what they currently have in their leisure and recreation toolbox. Like if they go to the gym, if they go biking, what's currently there. And then just ask them to try on like one activity for this assignment. So we actually have like a pretty decent crew who's doing like a combination of meditation and journaling. And one thing that I encourage folks to do, excuse me, in addition to being a business owner, I'm also a certified wellness coach. And as part of that, I really encourage people to experiment. You might have heard of the idea of like atomic habits or life hacking or kind of experimental sort of life design kind of stuff. And in wellness, I think sometimes we fall into this trap of like New Year's resolutions, right? I'm going to wake up every day at 5 and I'm going to go running, or I'm going to work out 3 times a week, for the rest of my life, like this indefinite future. And often that just sets us up for failure. And so, in the last part of this presentation, for each of your ideas, I would love for you to just identify like one thing that you could try out. And maybe it's like try out journaling 3 times, or it's become popular now to do like 30-day experiments with lifestyle changes. But if you can find like, one thing that you can be like, I am going to call like 3 potential therapists for my mental health, tomorrow. That kind of like makes that much more attainable and sets you up for success in a way that like, I'm going to go to counseling once a week. Excuse me. That I'm going to go to counseling once a week doesn't set you up for that. And so certainly with our business, we try to model that. So if you ever do like take a yoga class, we definitely encourage folks to sample and try out rather than like overly commit themselves at the beginning. And just a couple of things that I'm currently doing to attend to my own wellness with these ideas, because they might be helpful. I do drop into a yoga class, not super duper often, but definitely the community that we encourage at Current Wellness is more about like yoga for your own internal health rather than yoga for like poses and being fancy and being all balancy. And so identifying like the kind of opportunities that might have that same idea of like being welcoming can set you up for success. Also, it might sound like a funny way to pursue wellness, but like, yeah, for me, like being in the kitchen and teaching cooking classes just really like fills my soul. And that's like, I've invested a lot in that. But even if I do like brief cooking classes where I'm teaching people how to shuck oysters, that actually like makes me feel good for a couple of weeks. So like Connor and the young alumni crew came into our building a few weeks ago and we did a summer roll cooking class. And like, I'm still riding the high from that. It was really awesome. And then, man, sorry about that. Throat is not well, apparently. Also, I've been pursuing golf lately, but not to get like super great. more so because like I love going to the range and I love like practicing that swing ability. So with the last last little bit of time we have, as I'm falling apart, uh, I would love for you to include a question in the chat or an idea from your things that you want to like work on. What's like a small thing you could try in the next little bit of time with that?
And Nathan, I was gonna say, where was this photo taken as we wait for folks to.
So this is at Lonnie Pool.
That's a lot. Okay, I
So
thought so. I was
yeah,
like,
it's a
yeah.
convenient part of working on campus is that it's pretty easy for me to slip away and head
Yeah.
over there and hit a few balls. But
Hop over to
yeah,
some time.
definitely still struggling to learn that skill. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things where like I've realized for my own emotional wellness, like if I get out there for half an hour even, it just helps like reset the day. And it's really cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So as y'all might be thinking of things, yeah, just like twice a week, Alex. Yeah, journaling twice a week for a couple of weeks. I think that's a great place to start. Um, and also, I think like forgiving yourself if you don't meet that goal. Like I know for me, like I journal and try to journal often, and it was like when I realized that even if I miss a month of journaling and forgive myself for that, and then do it again and do it a couple of times the next week, like it's still helpful. It's not like I've failed at journaling. But yeah, with this wellness culture, returning to that idea, we have this idea that yeah, we need to journal every day, or we need to learning to ski. That's a yeah, Kristen. That's a good one. Uh, Hopefully, you can do that in North Carolina this year. It's always touch and go, right? If we have enough snow for it. But yeah, I think one thing that we don't really have a ton of time to talk about, but this idea of like giving yourself things to look forward to, I think is really big in wellness, and both personally and professionally. And so I know like if I have like a short trip even to look forward to, that sort of helps with my own day-to-day wellness. When I'm like looking ahead to something, like a even 2-day ski trip, to like West Virginia or something like that, that can really like give you motivation and help with stress relief. Yeah, and sort of seeing what there is in your when you move, Hannah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Another thing I didn't talk about for myself that I realized that I love is I love exploring new places and doing that kind of planning ahead. And so hopefully that's something that excites you, and definitely tying in the purpose of the job with getting excited for learning about a new city. If you're moving to a different city, I think that can be a really helpful way to be good to yourself, to be well. Yeah, Connor, I like that. Like going into the weekend with a good counseling session. Yeah, I think that can definitely be a cool way to time things. And maybe with journaling, Alex, maybe figuring out those days when, it might be sequenced in, you might set yourself up for success by seeing if you have like good time gaps or slower parts of the day, or maybe at the end of stressful days when journaling might be most effective. And same thing for all activities. How do they fit in to your existing life rather than trying to create a new life? Yeah, just make some tiny changes that you can integrate into your existing life. I think that's really the key. It's like, what are those 10-minute things, or maybe hour things? Or like, yeah, if it's a ski trip, what is the half hour you spend just setting the date throwing down, a little bit of cash to reserve that ski weekend where you're going to learn to ski. And those are really the things we're talking about here. So with that, just a couple of final things to wrap it up. I think that as you've realized through your comments, you can combine a lot of these things. So, as Connor mentioned with counseling leading into the weekend, it might be like you realize you love being outside on Saturday mornings, and we offer outdoor classes. I guess just a small plug during October, we're doing outdoor classes near our building, and sometimes if you like sort of use that motivation of I like being outside, and that can get you to a class or a yoga thing that might be good, that can be helpful. And then we used to do classes at transfer, and we know that like some of the motivation for folks being there for yoga was that afterwards they got a bagel sandwich from Benchwarmers. And I think like sometimes people would joke about that, and they would be like, oh, I'm doing a good thing so that I can do this bad thing, as if it's a trade-off. But to us, it was like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, both of those are wonderful. Having that bagel sandwich that like sends you into your Friday feeling good, and then also like having a little bit of yoga and maybe meeting new people, like that just sounds like such a killer combination, and nothing to feel bad about in that duo. And for me, definitely, I'm going to use the state fair. Hopefully, I'll get over there once or twice. And man, if a chicken and waffle on a stick is like something that makes you happy, like please do it. Because I was like super happy on this lunch break to the state fair having this chicken and waffle on a stick from Chicken Q. So think about small things, and think about the things that are wellness to you, rather than being led astray by media and Instagram. And I hope some of that's helpful. So I'm definitely happy to answer questions on the chat. My contact info is on there. Those are my Instagram handles. But also like, my email is on the NC State directory if you want to reach out to me that way. But I really appreciate y'all being here this morning.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nathan, for sharing all of that and bestowing just such good words and thoughts as we kick off our day here too. But yeah, want to open up the floor, for questions. We do have a few minutes. So if you have anything and you want to throw them in the chat, send them directly to us, or if you want to throw it in the Q&A feature, can definitely open that up as well. So we'll get folks the opportunity to kind of mingle, hang out here if you'd like, to ask those questions. And then we'll kind of, we'll share kind of just to what to expect next from our day, and just kind of debrief out that. But any questions for Nathan while we have him here with us this morning? I love that chicken and waffles on the stick. That is
have you had
awesome.
That one from there?
All of your photos were were amazing.
Yeah. So actually, it's funny. Britt was showing me what Chicken Q is doing this year at the fair. I guess it's like this chicken and grits thing that includes like fried chicken skin on it. Like it looks phenomenal.
Incredible. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a great question, Alex. So this question of is professional wellness different from personal wellness? To me and our philosophy, I don't think so. I'm of the belief that balance is an unrealistic expectation of life, especially now. Like, I know like one of the conversations that me and Connor had about this conference, like, I think he was like visiting a parent somewhere, or like it was like on a Sunday, and that's on him for if that's wellness to be working on Sunday. But yeah, I think that especially with remote work and COVID, like defining what your time is super important. And if you are like someone who has like a supervisor expecting you to like do work on a Sunday or late at night, or especially if those expectations are unclear, I think developing clarity around that is where personal and professional wellness really need to be integrated. I took the extreme approach, like as you could see from my photos, like I loved doing the outdoors personally, and so like I turned it into a profession, and definitely identify myself as like a work life integrator. And also owning a small business, if anybody's familiar with that, that definitely takes over personal and professional life. But for you, I think if you do want to separate them, you can. But I'd encourage you to bring your personal wellness to your profession in whatever ways that you can or are able to. Like for me, like this is kind of might be silly, but like I, I have this like surf, you can't really see it, but the lamp that's over here is like a coastal scene. And also I have this map of the Outer Banks in my office here on campus. And like, I don't use that to like refer people to it. It's really just because I look at the Outer Banks and I think of Ocracoke, and that brings in personal wellness for me. So I don't know if that helps, Alex, but yeah, I would encourage you to think about things more holistically than thinking about like personal versus professional, even though the session is named that. I hope it wasn't misleading. I hope you got what you came for. Um, yeah, wellness with a full-time job. Yeah, so I alluded to a little bit of that. Bringing in your own wellness into your job. But I think like so often now people aren't comfortable setting expectations or boundaries with work. And I think that's something that really needs to start from the beginning of your career and your work. So I'm not saying you should like be watching the clock and at 5 p.m. sharp you're like peace. But what I do mean is that having an open conversation with your supervisor about expectations and about what success means to your supervisor is super important. Just for a quick anecdote, I supervised two professional staff down at Wellness and Recreation. We usually had about 30 to 40 student staff that were part of our crew as well. And, it took me a few years to realize, but definitely for one of the people I supervised, their input and what they saw as success, was like showing up, their butt in their seat and like being there till too late in the day. But on the flip side, I was really looking for them just to get their shit done, pardon my French. And so if realized to have that conversation early on about like, oh, I learned that I should be there for 10 hours a day versus like I didn't care. Like my supervisee thought that was success. Like I was like, no, if you are not completing projects, I do not care how long you are here. You could be here for an hour and that would be okay. But yeah, so I would have those, try to be as open and honest as you can in those conversations, knowing that like having a good boss is like 10% of the bosses you have. Sorry to break it to you. But most managers are not great at expectation setting, clear expectations, evaluation, feedback. I think it's more the rarity that you'll have a good supervisor. So you might have to take that on. Connor, I don't know if you'd agree with that about management.
Yeah,
But
no, I think you're spot on, Nathan. I think too, curious to hear your thoughts on like what are some good ways, I know folks have had questions just around like how do we navigate, how do we balance this with a full-time job, right?
yeah,
Balancing wellness with
yeah.
that. But like even as you're job searching, before you get to a place, how do you like what are the right questions to ask to kind of identify whether an employer like really truly does authentically value, holistic wellness for you as an employee, both your personal and professional. I mean, they're one, right? One and the same. So just like what are some good questions to maybe ask through the
Yeah.
interview process or probing questions you can ask leadership throughout your onboarding or things like that?
Yeah, that's a great thought and question, because I think for my own self, like I think the more that I can uncover about current culture in an organization gives me the most information. Like I know when I've interviewed for jobs, I ask a lot about, what do the staff currently do? Like sort of like, is there a community? And I don't mean like do they go out for happy hour every week or something like that? But more so, I try to tease out like, oh, do people work out over lunch? Do folks, have different habits as part of their daily routines that suggest freedom and flexibility to attend to their own personal wellness? So, I mean, that's an indicator to me. I think that private industry can you can even hone in a little bit more on like tangible benefits that express wellness. So like y'all might be familiar with Bandwidth, this like booming company that started on Centennial campus, but they pay for all of their staff to have a membership at Carmichael, like for free, like completely for free. And if I saw that from an employer, man, like that really expresses a lot, right, about the value of the organization. If they're saying like, man, we're giving you this benefit, we want you to use it. And they even have a shuttle that they like bring all their staff to wellness and recreation over lunch. So looking for those clues, I think is really good. I think also figuring out for yourself, right? Like it's about your definition of wellness. So I think, if you can ask your supervisor, just how they define wellness and how they encourage it, that like might be a weird question, but I feel like in today's, day and age, people know that, wellness is important and people are talking more about mental health. So I think that's like a fair game question to ask. Did you have
Yeah.
any, Connor? Do you have a favorite question?
No, not that I can think. I was just, I mean, yeah, I think really ultimately like asking questions that probe at like organizational culture, right? Because I think like sometimes you can ask specific questions and sometimes they'll just tell you what you want to hear. But if you can ask kind of broader, overarching, things that speak to like themes of the workplace, I think those can be some of the most helpful, indicators of, an employer's true value and emphasis on wellness in the, related to the work that you do. So, yeah, no, I think that
Yeah.
was great. But
And also, if anybody else like on the panel or on the
yeah,
the webinar has a thought on that, feel free to throw it in the chat. There's
yeah, I
no
was
reason that me and Connor should be the only ones. I mean, we're like privileged and empowered being the only ones on
yeah.
video and audio. But yeah, if you have any tips for Hannah, feel free to share.
And actually, you know what I just realized?
Oh,
I just gave
oh
everybody the
no.
ability to speak, and I didn't realize that we could
Wow.
have done this sooner. So I apologize. Golly. So if anyone wants to jump in, I think I just gave y'all permission. So if you want to unmute
That's funny.
and chime in, well, yeah, you're like Nathan, this would have been great. Like, yeah, 30 minutes ago, right? But feel free to chime in too in our last few minutes here together. Would love to hear from y'all if you have other thoughts or things around that too. So. And yeah, to your point, Nathan, yeah, Zoom will have had the ultimate life hack when they can, yeah, make, musical interludes to break the
Make it
silence.
make it
Yeah,
seamless. Yeah. Yeah.
all
Well,
good.
maybe it was too late in the game, Connor.
I
Maybe it's
know, I know. That's my
but
fault.
thanks for
So
trying.
apologies.
It's all
Well,
good.
awesome.
It's
Well,
all good.
just want to say, one last time, Nathan, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing everything that you did, and just for all our attendees too for tuning in.
Yeah.
I
Thanks so
know
much for being
personally,
here, y'all.
yeah,
Oh, go
I've
ahead.
personally taken a lot from this. So excited to have had you.